Hi, I'm Orshi McNaughton, a board-certified holistic health practitioner, functional nutritionist, and a lifelong learner, and I'm dedicated to exploring cutting-edge wellness strategies, and I'm here to share knowledge that helps women push past their limits, elevate their performance, and step into their most powerful selves. Over the past few years, I've hosted the Women's Biohacking Conference featuring top experts in medicine, fitness, nutrition, and beyond. And until now, this exclusive content was reserved for our conference participants, but we are opening the vault to bring these powerful insights directly to you. You'll hear firsthand from our experts about the strategies and research that can transform your health. So here's a sneak peek of what you can expect.
If you go to your doctor today and you ask them for the amount of labs that I recommend a person get, for the vast majority of people just can't get these tests because the system is not designed for biohackers. It's designed as a sickness billing industrial complex. It's for billing and coding disease. It's really designed to fix really sick people and not really pay attention to you unless you're really, truly broken. So biohacking is like really making a statement saying, I don't want to wait till I'm sick to do something about my health. I know that health changes far earlier than disease manifests. So I believe that biohacking is about preventing and predicting disease and using data to drive decisions so that you can have actually measurably better health. Now, we live in a man's world where we're supposed to be on all the time, but realistically, women really should respect and live with their energy levels and design their lives around their periods. But unfortunately, our lives are designed around the way that men work. So what I've learned is that I have to be really careful about how I schedule the weeks around my period, because I know I'm not going to be as outwardly facing on. I'm not going to give as great of presentations. I'm going to be a little bit more subdued. I'm going to be a little bit more relaxed, and I'm going to have more food cravings. And so I have to be careful about which kind of carbohydrates I choose because I'm a little bit less insulin sensitive, right? As all women are during this time. And specifically the week before my period, I just need to be a little bit more gentle with myself because I can be a little bit, just more irritable and tired. So I give myself more space for relaxation and rest. And I do a little bit less socializing during the second half of my cycle than the first half. During the first half of my cycle, and for a lot of women who understand their biology, your biology is a lot more like a man's. You're basically able to go out and, rock those presentations. You have unbelievable energy for the gym. You can, eat more. You can eat essentially your body is a little bit more glucose sensitive. So you can eat those carbs and do harder exercise and higher intensity exercise and burn that glycogen. Now, fasting is one of those things that honestly, fasting frankly led to a spiritual awakening in my life. So I can't say that fasting is bad for women because I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't have done quite a lot of fasting. But I do think that too much fasting can certainly disrupt fertility and hormones, on purpose, by the way. It's our biological design to reproduce and to raise children. And so your body would have been trying to basically ensure survival versus reproduction in the event that there was a famine. So if you think about fasting, it makes total sense that your hormones are going to shift. So if you're trying to have a baby, fasting is probably not your friend, unless you maybe have polycystic ovarian disorder, insulin resistance, and really need to actually work on your blood sugar metabolism. The average woman who has a healthy metabolism, it doesn't have PCOS or insulin resistance, fasting can be problematic for premenopausal women. I think 14 hours is pretty reasonable for most women. 16 if you have a little bit of weight to lose. But once you start hitting above 16 to 18 to 24 hours, you got to be really careful because you might throw off your hormones. And I learned that the hard way. At the same time, I definitely improved insulin resistance significantly in my body by doing some fasting and ketosis. And I don't think I would have a healthy metabolism today if I hadn't have used those metabolic interventions to boost my health and to get my blood sugar into the healthy range. That being said, you gotta really try to tailor these interventions to your body with where you're at, what your goals are for your health, and where your baseline health status is. So what I've learned is that medicine and health personalized medicine and optimizing health and biohacking is really all about finding out what works for you and not necessarily just bandwagoning off of what you hear, but actually figuring out, like, is this really right for my body? And should I actually be doing this thing that everyone else is doing? That's really kind of the way I see it. Women need to be a little bit more careful than men, because some of these metabolic interventions can actually throw off our hormones and throw off, a bunch of things that we need to maintain our health.
The fact that completely opposite things can work for different people. So, veganism on one side and carnivore on the other, for example. I mean, that says to me that there must not be one right diet. And if there was one right diet, I think we probably would have found it by now. But as far as, finding the diet that works for you, I mean, that's where self-experimentation really comes into play. And I think the two tenets I was talking about, one is that especially people who struggle with metabolic issues, they might find that actually looking at their macros can be helpful. So some people do better on a low carb diet, for example. I started doing low carb. That's how I fell into the whole health world. I'm not low carb now. Now I'm very high carb, actually. Some people do better on a lower fat approach. And I think at least what works for me really well, and I've seen work really well for people, is trying both of those approaches, but not at the same time. So, not combining super high carb and a high fat meal together can be problematic, I think, for a lot of people. So I found a lot of freedom because I do a 1 meal a day intermittent fasting approach. And I found a lot of freedom, and I make all my meals either high carb, low fat, or high fat. Well, I don't even really do that high fat, or moderate fat, low carb. So playing with the macros. And also I want to say to all the women, I think it's really easy. I think a lot of people, they'll be doing a standard American diet, or they might, a lot of people like me come to the quote health world by trying a low carb diet or keto diet. And I think a lot of people get stuck there because it will work so well in the beginning. And then you get this fear of carbs and you think that you have to be low carb or keto for the rest of your life. And I see so many people get stuck, even though they're not experiencing the energy anymore or the weight loss. I have had so many people who have been doing low carb, and I have suggested to try something like what I do now, which is I eat high protein, like high fruit, low fat, and it works so well for me. Not saying that's like the one way to go, but if you're doing low carb and keto and it's not working so much anymore, you might want to try just like flipping everything completely. The second tenet besides the macros was like food sensitivities. So people, can have inflammatory responses to different foods. And I think it's really, really important to find the foods that are nourishing you without creating inflammation. So, the obvious ones would be things like gluten for a lot of people, lectins. Some people have problems with dairy, but the reason I made my app called Food Sense Guide, it was because I was just personally overwhelmed with all of the different potential things that I could have been reacting to.
What's really happening in the biohacking world, it just makes me realize, that's the less than 1%, right? That's just that little tweaking, that maybe that 10%, that little tweaking, that little stuff that we have to do. When it comes to the 90%, it's how we eat, it's how we think, it's how we move, it's how we relate to others, and how we sleep. So those are key components. So when we look at biohacking, we have to look at these areas, right? Because that makes all the difference. And for me, when I think of longevity and not just the number of years that we have, but the quality of those years, and this is where I think this whole concept that, certainly saved my life is getting into ketosis in a healthy way, and the alkalinizing foods and practices that help us optimize our health. And again, having the flexibility, sometimes having our feasting, sometimes having our fasting. But for me, this longevity, because we need that mental clarity. We need to be able to respond, especially in perimenopause when your hormones are crazy. We need to be able to respond, not react, or, as in my case, was overreacting, right? And I hear from so many women, it's like, where did that monster come from? I never would have responded in that way. Absolutely. That's hormone imbalance and inflammation. When we get to the root causes of that, we address that. We support our innate physiology. Our body's wisdom takes over. And that's what I love about what I witness happening in other people's life is this empowerment, taking our power over our body. So I think those are things that we miss sometimes in the overwhelming confusion of women's health and certainly in perimenopause and menopause.
So when you hear obesity medicine, you actually need to hear muscle-centric medicine, because if you can account for these issues in skeletal muscle first, you can actually prevent subsequent weight gain, subsequent low levels of inflammation. You actually can protect yourself from these diseases that we're all trying to fix. The idea that muscle is an endocrine organ serves on multiple levels. Number one, like I said, it releases myokines. Now, these myokines direct nutrient utilization. For example, it affects the liver, it affects lipolysis, the breakdown of fat. So it's not just exercise that impacts weight and muscle, it's the release from the muscle that exercise enables the body to function by. So that's one aspect. The other thing is that exercising skeletal muscle, contracting skeletal muscle interfaces with the immune system. And it does this in quite a few ways. Number one, it releases glutamine. Exercising muscle releases glutamine, which then goes and feeds lymphocytes, cells of the immune system. Here, you can also see that muscle is our metabolic currency. So we know now that it has a myokine impact, which is when you contract it, it goes to the brain. We've all heard of BDNF. It even goes to the bone. It's also one of the ways in which it acts against and in the prevention of osteoporosis. So there's the myokine aspect. We also have to think about how it relates to the relationship with the immune system. And then finally, we think about skeletal muscle and how it utilizes substrates, for example, glucose. 80% or more of glucose disposal is in the muscle. We all, any biohacker, any woman who is really looking to optimize their performance on a daily basis needs to make sure that their blood sugar is managed. They need to make sure that their skeletal muscle is healthy. One of the ways in which you must do this is really optimizing, number one, understanding that the correct framework for optimization is really muscle. And then the second part of that is understanding that what we do, how we train, how we eat really impacts this system.
I'm here to help you challenge the status quo, break through your limits, and equip you with the strategies to become your most empowered self. So are you ready to step up? Subscribe to The Optimized Woman on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Hey, don't miss out on our first episode, because your journey to becoming the best version of yourself starts now.